Welcome to the Screaming Blackbird podcast. In this show, we will talk with military officers and professional leaders to explore Air Force careers and engage in leadership dialogue. The Screaming Blackbird podcast is created by the cadets at Air Force ROTC, Detachment 605 at North Carolina A&T State University. The contents of this show are for educational and entertainment purposes only. They do not contain any official information nor opinions of Air Force ROTC or North Carolina A&T State University.
Appreciate you guys. See ya. See ya. We're back. Welcome everybody. We are back to part 2 of episode 19 of the Screaming Blackbird podcast. I'm joined with Lieutenant Matt Redbord. How we doing, Matt?
Still doing good, ready to go, man. Episode 1 or part 1 was awesome and ready to dive into part 2. Let's do it.
Terrific. Let's talk about, so we just finished talking about pilot training and those long 12-hour days. And you talked about the balance. You said you're allowed to have a balance and you're allowed to have a life of your own. Do you have a life of their own? Are there any big changes that are happened to you recently that you'd like to speak about?
Yeah, I feel like you might be hinting at something. So I recently got married. It's the love of my life. For those at Det 605 may remember her as Cadet Campsey. But yeah, Emma and I got married about, a little over a month and a half ago. And yeah, it was the best decision of my life marrying Emma, and it was a very exciting time. So definitely big life changes, and she moved in down to Columbus with me, and yeah, life is good right now for sure.
Congratulations, that's a big deal. How is it having such a big life change like that while doing something as strenuous as pilot training?
A few things to mention there. When I first met Emma, I knew that she was going to be the person that I was going to marry. We knew we were perfect for each other. So I guess deciding that I was going to propose wasn't a really big decision that I made, because I sort of had that realization really on in our relationship. And we didn't do a wedding. We just did the paper marriage ceremony for now. We're going to do our wedding when I'm done with pilot training, or at least probably at least a year from now. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like there was too much kind of going on in terms of making it official, getting married. So it wasn't like a huge distraction or anything. And when I was in the academic phase of pilot training, that's when we got married, and it was the academic phase is a lot more of a laid-back culture or laid-back schedule, as I kind of talked about before. It wasn't too time-consuming. So yeah, very manageable. And even if that did happen and I did have to plan a wedding during pilot training, it's all about time management and compartmentalizing your headspace and time. When you are at the squadron and you're trying to train to be a pilot, you spend all of your brain bites trying to become a better pilot. And when you go home, the best thing you can do is to spend 0 brain bites trying to become a better pilot, and spending all of that time and attention on your support system and on your family life, and maybe doing something like planning a wedding. So it's just really about prioritizing and compartmentalizing the different aspects of your life. That's definitely the biggest thing, and it's not something I do perfectly. Sure, I go home and I'm talking to Emma at the dinner table, and she's telling me about her day, and I'm thinking about all the things that I messed up on my flight today. It happens, but it's just what you're trying to strive for, is to just compartmentalize. Yeah, and I think when if you choose the right partner, your partner will become your support system, and it becomes absolutely essential to have that in your life. Having Emma in my life makes me better, makes me study harder, makes me more focused, and makes me closer to the person or the pilot that I want to be, because she is aligned with the same goals that I have. So it becomes, I feel like it's a huge advantage having Emma in my life and being married to her, and it definitely 100% makes me better.
Awesome. So you got a new life here at Columbus Air Force Base. You got a new wife, congratulations. And I heard you just bought a house here, is that true?
Yeah, so my dad and I have been investing in real estate since my sophomore year in college, around the time COVID was breaking out. And so when I came down here, I got in processed, and I went over to the dorms, which is where most people have to process through. They have to kind of go to the dorms if they're not married. I said, hey, I'm here. You guys have a place for me to stay? And they're like, nope, sorry, the dorms are full. So you're good to go, move off base and do whatever you need to do. So immediately, my dad and I called up a real estate agent. We started looking at houses, and we really got lucky. We found the perfect house in a beautiful neighborhood, and all the numbers made sense in our mind. And yeah, we put in an offer, got it accepted within 30, or we got it accepted and closed within 30 days. Wow. Wow, that one came right overhead.
Yeah, that was sick.
That was pretty cool. I mean, he was probably 100 feet over our heads. That was sick.
That was awesome.
Anyways, yeah, we bought a house and I rented out to one of my roommates. So that kind of helped with the mortgage. And yeah, great life decision. If you want to talk more about real estate and that kind of stuff, we can get to that if you have time for your questions there. But yeah, it's definitely a good thing to do if you have the means to do it, for sure.
Terrific. So new life, new wife, new house, and you got a brand new watch this week. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So Garmin Fenix 7 Pro, Sapphire, Solar, Reserve, everything.
Yep.
Jackson was generous enough to give it to me as a gift, and it is so cool. I mean, we can't really show the camera, but I'm looking at a little T6 airplane on here. It's got an American flag. It tells me my steps, my heart rate, it's got an altimeter on here. It's showing me my altitude. I don't think I talked to you about this yet, but I even found a way to program it where the screen can flash red or yellow when I'm below a certain altitude.
Seriously?
Yeah, so like when I'm coming in, so when we're training here, we have to stay, like when we go out to our area, we have to stay below a certain altitude and above a certain altitude, so we're basically in a block. And I set this so that it flashes if I'm gonna go above that or below that. So, I mean, it probably won't actually help in reality, but it's just cool in theory to think that a watch can prevent me from busting my MOA.
Could prevent you from hooking, could even save your life one day.
Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah. So that's the best thing that I could have gotten out of this watch for sure. Thank you for that.
Yes, of course.
Super cool.
Now we're matching. So we talked about big personal updates. We talked about your life here. Moving on, after talking about your 12-hour workday, we want to talk about your future. Okay. So what does the rest of pilot training hold for you, and then what are some of the next steps after that?
Okay, yeah, so you're typically on the flight line of T6 anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and that is dependent on so many things like weather, your proficiency, maintenance, ops. I mean, there's so many factors that go into how quick you go through the syllabus. But in theory, I should finish around late April, early May with T6s. From there, track select happens, and that is basically when I find out if I'll go on to fly the T1 or the T38. If I go the T1 route, that's about another 3 months of training here in UPT before you get your no-kidding airframe and you move on to go fly things like the C5, the C17, the U-28, all those other heavier aircraft. And then if you go the T38 route, I'll be at Columbus for another, give it 6 to 9 months, depending on a lot of factors. And that training is broken up into two pieces. There's T38 training, and then right after that, there's Intro to Fighter Fundamentals training, IFF. And that training is going through a little bit of a transformation now too, so the timeline is totally skewed. But they're doing this new thing called Fighter Bomber Fundamentals, where they basically take those two aspects of training and they convert it into one, and it's supposed to, I think, shorten the timeline a little bit and to make T38 training go a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficient. So that's a possibility too. So if I go the T38 route, which is my goal, is to get to the 38 for now, that timeline is a little bit more up in the air, a little bit more uncertain. And I mean, that's something to be said about most things in the Air Force. Is the future and your future timeline is just uncertain, no matter what your job is. You don't know when you're going to get that next assignment. You don't know when you're going to, what base you're going to end up at, what your lifestyle is going to look like in 6 months to a year, when you're going to go TDY, when you're going to deploy. So for those listening that are in ROTC, just know if maybe you're like, hey, I don't know when I'm going to get my field training dates yet, I'm trying to plan out my summer, like that is only just a taste of what you're going to feel when you're on active duty. Like we're talking about, hey, you need to pack up and move your entire life in 3 months. So that's just a reality and maybe a wake-up call to how actually it is on active duty. So that was a quick aside. Back to timeline here. After that, if I go the T-38 route and I finish fighter bomber fundamentals, I should be done end of 2024, early 2025. And then I go on to either my follow-on aircraft, whether that's the B course, whether that's getting FAPed, which means coming back here and being an instructor pilot. FAPE stands for FAIP, First Assignment Instructor Pilot. And yeah, so it's just a whole lot of even more uncertainty after I finish the follow-on training. So that's a little bit of what that looks like. And then, yeah, if I do go to the B course for another aircraft, that's anywhere from, again, 6 to 12 months of training. And then from there, you go to your first ops unit, probably 3 years after you first pinned on second lieutenant, and then you're at your no kidding ops unit doing the job, potentially get deployed, that kind of stuff.
Sounds like a lot of good options
For sure.
to choose from.
Yeah, a lot of different avenues and different roads to go down, for sure.
Terrific. Runway's getting kind of busy now.
Yeah, we've got a busy pattern here. I think we got 2 or 3 aircraft in the pattern. And then we got a 2-ship formation right over your shoulder there. They'll come up on initial, and then they'll do a final braking turn.
That's awesome. Those T1s are a lot louder than I thought.
Yeah, I typically don't see that many T1s out, so it's kind of cool.
So let's talk about some rapid change. You said it, and the Air Force says it best. Flexibility is the key to air power.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's sort of the excuse you get when something doesn't go as you planned or when something is unexpected. But let's talk about some expectations. When it comes to expecting something at pilot training, how robust is the system? How strict is the syllabus, or is it always changing too?
So the way the syllabus is written, it's written in black and white, and it's very strict. There's a rule and there's a protocol for everything. That's on the more tactical level. If we look at it from a more strategic level, a big picture view of the syllabus, it's pretty fluid. Like it's changing, at least right now, it's changing pretty often. In the past 60 years, pilot training has almost never changed. And then up until about 5 years ago, they looked at it and they're like, hey, we need to make some big changes. We need to, CSAF of the Air Force, Charles Q. Brown, General Charles Q. Brown, he said, we need to accelerate, change, or lose. And that was what the generals who were overseeing pilot training said as well. We need to see a transformation. And so it really has been going through a lot of changes in the last 5 years. Everything from pinning on pilot wings when you finish T6s rather than when you finish your 38 or T1 training. That was a huge change. The overall syllabus, I think, is a little shorter to make sure that they're training pilots to keep up with the demand and the shortage that's going on in the Air Force community, in the Air Force pilot world. And so as students, we're kind of feeling that. We're going through that, hey, just be flexible. Things are going to change, just understand that. I mean, I just found out yesterday, actually, that my intended graduation was supposed to be for early April. Now it's looking like late April, early May. So it's just, hey, flexibility is key to air power, right? That's just what you have to kind of fall back on. And there's something to be said about managing your expectations too. Just if you know everything's going to change, then when things stay normal, it's kind of just a nice surprise. But yeah, the way the syllabus is written, it's supposed to be very, very strict in one way, but knowing that it's going to change is the biggest thing, for sure.
Sounds like a lot of change. Sounds like it's hard to expect something because it might change. But you give a lot, and you're pledging to serve this country, and the country does a lot for their service members. Talking about those benefits, not suggesting you or anyone are serving for those benefits, but the reality is that our country does a great job of taking care of their service members. Can you talk about some of those benefits now that you're on active duty?
Yeah. So tons of benefits to be taken advantage of when you're on active duty, and I mean, you can think of it as taking advantage of the benefits, but most of the time it's just your country, your government, these private companies' just way of saying thank you for doing that service that you talked about. So some of the things that I've been diving into a little bit, well, just about everywhere you go offers a military discount. So whether you're shopping at Dick's Sporting Goods or you're going out to eat, they may be like, hey, here's 15% off your meal, or Emma and I went out to eat. We went out for hibachi, where the big open grill, and you're sitting out there with a few other strangers. And they were talking, and here at Columbus, I guess us the guys going through pilot training, we kind of stick out like sore thumbs. If you kind of got the fade going on and you look like a college kid, yeah, you're probably a student pilot. And so someone was like, "Hey, are you a pilot at the base?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a student there. I'm just learning how to fly." And they're like, "Oh man, like thank you so much for your service. Like my son, like he's in the military as well." And you learn so much about what you have in common with other people, and they're so appreciative for what you do. It came down to it, and I talked to the server. I'm like, "Hey, like, can we have our bill? Like, we're ready to finish up here." And she's like, "Oh no, like the people up there, they took care of your bill for you." So that was a really big surprise, and it was a really cool to see that people really do appreciate what you're doing. So, not saying that's one of the built-in benefits, but it is something that happens every now and again. And the biggest thing you could do is just show your gratitude when something like that happens.
What are those guys?
That's T-38. I don't think we'll be able to talk over the T-38s. So.
Yeah, they win this battle.
Yeah. We'll let this guy go by real quick and continue with what you're saying. I think that guy waved at us.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what's up. Maybe we'll have him on the podcast next.
Yeah, we'll hit him up. And then other benefits you can take advantage of. There's the VA loan that is offered by a lot of banks. So basically what that is, it's a loan offered to those in the military or maybe even veterans that you can take out for a mortgage for a house, and you can get a really low interest rate on it, lower than where you'd find elsewhere. And you can also put a lot less money down on the initial down payment on the house. So definitely, like, this is not financial advice. I was a finance major, so I know what I'm talking about a little bit, but go talk to your financial advisor for legal advice. That being said, the VA loan, it's a huge benefit, and it's something that you could definitely look into if you're looking to buy a house, because putting down next to nothing as a down payment on a house makes buying a house a very real possibility for those who may not have the means for that big upfront payment. So that, and then there's also credit cards. So I know a popular credit card amongst my peers is the Amex Platinum card. It provides all sorts of travel benefits and rewards points and free credits for Uber and Instacart and all sorts of random stuff. So that's something that each person should do their own research on. But the cool thing is these credit cards have these big annual fees, and a lot of times they waive them for the military because they're appreciative of our service, and they know what we're doing for our country, and it's their way of saying thank you. So there's I can't even talk over it. But yeah, so there's definitely benefits to be looked into there. And then there's all sorts of like miscellaneous benefits that you see around. Like if you travel with on a commercial airliner, a lot of times they'll give you free check bags. I think American is like 3 free check bags if you're on active duty. And then if you're traveling on orders, you get like 5 free check bags. So that's huge. And yeah, so it's kind of on each individual person to go on and do their own research, but it's out there, and I think that everybody, it's worth their time of day to do that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Terrific. So as you can tell, we're here at Columbus Air Force Base. We've got T1s taking off, we got T6s going in the pattern, we got T38s that are joining the party.
Yes, sir.
A lot of folks that come in, they start on the T6, and they either track the T1 or the T38. What are some of the different aircraft that you could fly in your near future, and what are some of the different reasons? Maybe one's better for family, one's better for different bases you want to look at, or different culture, lifestyle?
Yeah, so this one, we're talking about culture and lifestyle with different airframes. This is very subjective to the person. So I'll speak on to what my personal opinions are and mentorship that I have heard. But what I say is true for me may not be true for everyone else. So there's a disclaimer on that. But I will say that if you go fly for the heavies, you'll most likely have a more laid-back lifestyle. The flying that you do, you just spend a lot less time in training, and you spend more time doing the mission. So it's a little bit less, I'd say, stressful. You're not worried about that next check ride as much. You're not worried about that next upgrade as much. That stuff still goes on in the heavy community. But the big thing with those guys, especially in Air Mobility Command, is they're always on the go. They're always doing TDYs, to go drop off people in this country or drop off payloads in this country or whatever. I've talked to some C-17 guys who are assigned to Charleston, and they said, yeah, man, Charleston's like one of the best bases you can get, but we're on the road 200 days out of the year. So, I mean, you can get a base that's awesome for 156 days out of the year, but you're never with family outside of that. So that's a really tough thing. So sure, maybe you're not working as hard on the day-to-day stuff, but you're away from home more. So that's kind of how the heavy lifestyle is. But if you go the fighter route, which is I think the avenue I want to take, you're at home a lot more often. And when you do deploy, you're deployed for 6 months, and then you probably won't deploy again for another year, year and a half, 2 years. And when you're home, and you don't expect a TDY outside of that too often. I mean, sure, they come up for various reasons, but not nearly as much as what the heavy guys do. Yeah.
Seeing those planes take off, when you talk about tracking and going to one plane or the other, is there a celebration or something specific that you guys do where you announce what plane you're going to get?
Yeah, we'll dive into that real quick. I just want to add one more point about the fighter lifestyle is that you're training a lot harder. You're constantly going through upgrades when you're not deploying. But when you're home, you have that time with your family. And so that's the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest reason why I want to go to the fighters is being home with family lifestyle kind of thing. So that's that. And then I think you were kind of hinting at drop night a little bit. So drop night is a tradition at pilot training bases where students finish pilot training, they get their wings, and they find out what aircraft they're going to get. And not only is it a party because the students are done with training and they're finally winged aviators, they're going to get to go do the job that they've been wanting to do for so long, but they also find out what aircraft they're going to get, and there's tons to celebrate with that. I mean, when you get your aircraft, not only are you finding out what aircraft that you're going to fly, but you found out what kind of lifestyle you're going to live based off of the things we just talked about. You find out what bases are going to be available to you, what kind of culture that you're going to be entering into. So it's a really big deal for the students, and it's totally worth celebrating. And it's pretty cool. So I encourage anyone who's interested in drop nights to just do a quick YouTube Columbus Air Force Base drop night and watch them. It's basically how I like to describe it. It's like a roast that you kind of see on Comedy Central, where there's somebody up front and everyone's roasting that one guy, meets college game day decision, where you have the student trying to decide where they're going to go spend their next 4 years playing college football or something. So put those two together and you have drop night. You have a guy up in the front of the room getting roasted, and then there's a projector behind him, and then he finds out what aircraft that he's going to fly next. And then it's a huge celebration. There's some choice beverages that go around. You invite your family, you invite all your fellow classmates. It's a great time, and it's something that we're gonna actually go do tomorrow night. I'll give you a taste of Columbus Air Force Base culture a little bit, and we'll get you a drop night in. Should be fun.
Terrific. Awesome. So as we wrap up here, we've got 2 listener questions that we'd like to ask you. The first one is cadets that are eager to follow in your footsteps. They want to become pilots themselves. What do they do so that way they can be as competitive as possible to either get that EA slot or get that pilot slot?
Yeah. So I'll answer this question in 2 ways: a more tactical way, and then maybe a broader motivational way. The tactical way is to get a pilot slot and to get to pilot training, you got to do well in RTC. And what well looks like in RTC is going to look a little different for each person, but objectively speaking, you have to have a good GPA, and you're going to have a good PT score. Those are non-negotiables. And I know good is a broad term, but I would say if you're above a 3.5 GPA wise and above a 95 on your PT score, you're looking like a competitive cadet for a pilot slot. You're in a good spot. Anything below a 3 and below a 90, you're reaching a little bit. So I encourage you, if you are falling below that and you want a pilot slot to get those numbers up a little bit. And then from there, the other big aspect into pilot training selection is your commander's ranking. And your commander is going to rank you based off of both your GPA and PFA, but he's also going to rate you based off of your character and your leadership potential and some of the things that you do on a day in, day out basis at ROTC. So that's why it's so important when you show up to Lead Lab that you're doing the most you can for your leadership training, for your peers, from your military officer training, and that you're just trying to be the best cadet that you can be. And some of the ways you do that are just kind of what we talked about before, just being a bro, taking care of the people on your left and right, being a good leader when you're a POC, being a good leader to your GMC below you, and working as hard as you can. And, you know, like I said, pushing your potential as much as you can. So that's kind of the tactical things that you can do. And then more on a philosophical standpoint, or I guess for me, more practical thing that I did was I meditated often on ways that I can be my best. And I know I talked about that a little bit earlier, but what that looked like for me is when I was in college, and I still do this to this day, I wake up each morning, I pour myself my cup of coffee, and I sit there quietly, and I think to myself, I think, how did yesterday go? I give myself a mental debrief of what can I have done better yesterday to be a better person, to be a better officer, be a better student pilot, when I was a cadet, to be a better cadet, to be a better AS400, to be a better ops group commander, be a better podcast host. I was always thinking about what could I be doing to get better. And then I'd write those things down. I used to keep notes on my phone and have a whole list of different things I want to work on. And then I would meditate about what the rest of my day looked like, and plan it out from there. All right, I have the leadership lab at 3 o'clock today. What am I going to do differently? If I'm in front of people and I'm going to be talking, what am I going to say? Specifically, what words am I going to use? Are these words going to resonate with people? This morning I talked about maybe some of the things I'm going to talk about on this podcast today, or that I already talked about. And really the reason why I do that is to be very intentional with the way that I live my life, with the leadership that I try to portray on the people around me. So that, I think that's one tactical takeaway that somebody could take listening to this podcast out of it, and one actionable thing that they could do. And you know, you find what works for you, and you find whichever way you find to get better. I just think it's important to meditate on that and to think it through. So yeah, that was a long-winded answer to a simple question, but I hope that was able to provide some insight to the listeners.
Yeah, it does. I'm sure it helped.
Sweet.
Second listener question is, what is the best military base that you've been to, and why?
Yep, so I've been to only been about 5 bases, I think. I would say my favorite is probably Charleston Air Force Base. It's got a beautiful golf course on it. It's right on the water. I mean, 30 minutes from the beach if there's bad traffic, but it's close enough, you know, a lot closer than Columbus Air Force Base. You know, I've been out to Maxwell for field training. I didn't really get to experience everything with that base. Went to Wright Pat, huge base, but I went there in the wintertime, so it wasn't the best time to see it. And then I've been here at Columbus, and this base is really small, relatively speaking. I think we have like 5,000 people, 5,000 active duty stationed on this base. But there's a very good sense of community here. There's always familiar faces walking around, whether that be in the gym or the commissary or the T6 squadron. You really get to know everyone really, really quickly here. And I think that aspect is really cool. But overall, what base would I want to get assigned to in the future? Yeah, I'd probably say Charleston.
Charleston?
Even though they don't fly the aircraft that I'm hoping for, I think that's a cool base.
Awesome. Terrific, Matthew. So any other final parting shots, any wisdom that you want to leave us with that you've learned since you've left Detachment 605?
I mean, I feel like we covered most of it. To those cadets listening, just keep working your tail off, keep setting goals, and keep shooting high. That's the best way that you're gonna continue to grow and succeed in the program and work towards that those gold bars that everyone's shooting for in RTC. So keep up the hard work, keep up the motivation and the energy, and I want to thank you for having me on the podcast and keeping this thing going. I think introducing a video aspect is super cool, and I'm really humbled and honored that you invited me to do a podcast. So thank you, and thank you for keeping this thing going.
Of course, yeah. It's really come full circle now that you were on episode 1 and that I have you back for my first episode, which is episode 19 of this podcast. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Sweet, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Thanks again, Jackson, and thanks to the listeners.
Yep, guys, so I appreciate you coming in, listening. Both episodes were a blast. Tune in for next episode. We've got an AS400 who's transferring detachments, so we can get an interesting perspective from there. I think this guy knows her. He just proposed a few weeks ago, so tune in next week, and I appreciate you guys.
See ya.
See ya!
Good stuff, bro.